Hello, I'm Chris Salisbury, and today I'm talking to Jeannie Haggerty. Jeannie is the first chair in family and community medicine at McGill University in Canada, and she's had a very influential career as one of the leading primary care researchers in North America, including a stint as president of NAPCRG, the North American Primary Care Research Group. So, Jeannie, thanks very much for talking to us.
It's a real privilege to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you to talk about some of your career highlights, but let's just start off by hearing a bit more about how you got into this field. I think you started with a master's degree in epidemiology and biostatistics. Is that right? How did you get involved in family medicine?
Well, actually, yes, I did have a master's in epidemiology and biostatistics, which was itself kind of an accidental entry, if I could say that. And then I had my supervisor from my master's was contacted by somebody he was contacted because there was a project in Costa Rica that had come up and they had contacted the chair of family medicine at McGill to see if they would be interested in helping them establish a family and community medicine residency in Costa Rica. And my supervisor was not in a position to do that, but he said, well, I can recommend somebody who did. And so I think he basically lied about me. Not really, but he recommended me, and they were looking for somebody who spoke Spanish, who kind of knew the field and the other requirement was somebody who could raise money, who would be able to actually, raise the money for it. So that was a total lie, being told that I could do any of that. And but this was actually just somebody, as I reflect on my career, a lot of it is just being with kind of championed or put forward by people who see things in me that I didn't see in myself. So
Mm.
the fact that I spoke Spanish, for instance, was just that's just who I am. I didn't think of that as a strength or a particular asset. I just thought that's what I did. And, I had been a good student and I guess there was just things that he saw in me that I could do. So I got launched into this project in Costa Rica as the coordinator. That was my deal, is that if I did this job and if I got the money, that I would be able to actually go there and just be the coordinator. I didn't have any greater pretensions of that. So in fact, we did. We got the money, and I was involved in this project in Costa Rica for 5 years.
Hmm.
And that was like my inside uh, track, I would say, with family medicine. And the director of the department, Bill Davis at the time, in order to prepare me to go and to do my job, he gave me an incredible exposure to family medicine. So I began going and actually observing how things were set up. I participated, I overheard interviews with people who were applying to family medicine residents at the time. I went to meetings, I went to scientific sessions, I looked at how supervision was done. He even gave me like architectural drawings or things about what, when you wanted to have like a practice unit, how you needed to set it up for a teaching unit. And so I really had an incredible training, I would say, and foundation in how you run a program. So
That's
then, of course,
really
I went to Costa Rica, and that was like full on, but it was awesome. And I have to say, I think I fell in love with the discipline and just it was a young discipline at the time. So that was in the 80s, mid 80s. So
that's
yeah.
really interesting because do you have any kind of reflections on what you've learned about that? What you're saying about someone saw something in you hadn't seen in yourself, and that gives you any reflections for advising younger academics starting now?
Well, I think that it's the importance of having a good mentor, a mentor who's willing to sort of promote you.
Mm.
And I don't know in terms of, yeah, I do think that I don't know if my mentor at the time could have articulated to me what my strengths were. I think that would have been helpful. His theory of professional development was actually throw them in the deep end, and if they swim, that's
Yeah,
great. And
yeah.
if they drown, just like me, I don't know, you don't even have to haul them out, just let them drown or whatever. So it wasn't, I think that it would have been, I would have been better served by somebody who'd been able to articulate those things. But it
Hmm.
did build a kind of a know-how in me that was really helpful.
And you have been successful at getting money and getting projects off the ground, even if that wasn't your expectation.
That's correct. And it was interesting because it started small. And for that, I do have to say that my mentor was extremely helpful, just giving me tips and then just say, well, try this, do it small. And then he was awesome at getting money.
Mm, mm.
So I think that he did actually mentor me very specifically in that area. Yeah.
Okay. And then your particular area of interest is the accessibility and quality of primary care and the impact of health system policies. How did you get into that? Why that topic?
Wow. Well, I actually kind of came of age academically, I would say, in my master's, kind of at I'm not sure, the apogee or whatever of evidence-based medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really interested, like that was, anyways, all about the rigor of the science. And actually, my first job after my master's was to be the coordinator of something called the Canadian Preventive Services Task Force that did systematic, well, at the time, they were reviews of literature to make guidance about preventive services and so on. So it was a really great, rigorous background, but it was really clear that this was not the most important thing in how people were making decisions. And so I was very interested about, well, what is it that affects medical decision making? And so that was kind of one of the reasons that anyway, why I pursued doctoral studies. I was really curious about that because after observing in Costa Rica the way that even decisions were made about who was a good doctor and who wasn't a good doctor, it didn't seem to me like it wasn't, there was something else that was happening. It was, affected. So I was just curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was really curious about how, like, what are the other factors? And in fact, in my research, in my dissertation for my doctoral studies, I was looking initially at the relationship between licensing scores in the medical exam and then future behavior. So I was specifically looking at, how students at the end of their training scored on the preventive part of the exam, and then their mammography
Right.
screening
Yeah.
specifically.
Yeah.
And it was actually the factor that was the most influential to mammography screening was continuity of care, was the fact that it was concentration of care. And this is like in early practice of doctors, like not, established, but if it was clear that they were able to establish an ongoing relationship with women, they were more likely to get this mammography behavior. So I was just really curious about, okay, well, what is that and what affects continuity? And so that's why I got into I was interested in the policies that sort of create, that support things like concentrating of care or decisions to work in certain areas and so on. So for a while, that was my main interest.
Well, that gives me a neat introduction to the topic of continuity of care, which is probably in the UK at least what you're best known for, I would think. I don't know if that's true in North America, but
I think
yeah.
so.
And I was going to ask you how you got into that, but I think you've answered that. But it's a topic that seems to me to wax and wane in policy. It becomes fashionable to talk about, then it disappears again, and then it comes back. What do you think are the key things we've learned?
Well, if I can just say, I think that we're not always well served by continuing to use the word continuity, which I think in primary care, we sort of have a sense of what that means. It is about establishing this longitudinal relationship over time. But the way that it's used in other disciplines and is it's used differently. And that was probably my main claim to fame, I guess, that I did my postdoctoral work looking at how continuity was like used in other disciplines. It was like a cross-disciplinary review. And so I think that the idea of continuity is defended by everybody, but the how-to of it becomes wobbly. And I think that sometimes in primary care, we have not, there's a kind of a little bit of a disconnect between our understanding that that longitudinal relationship is actually critical to the sensitivity, diagnostic sensitivity that can be brought in, and the person-centered, therapeutic design and so on. But then just saying that it's concentration of care kind of minimizes it to something that is less than the whole thing. So
Yeah.
I think that we haven't always known how to speak about it and defend what's actually the underlying principle of it is that this is a competent, a clinically competent, relationally savvy, highly specialized skill set that underlies the whole thing. It's not only about, the concentration of care. But it is an important mechanism, and the evidence is so strong for it. I keep looking at the evidence of it, and it is so strong. It is unbelievably strong for just the concentration of care.
I mean, I think one of the things you contributed was helping us to disentangle these different concepts. And it concerns me that sometimes people think, well, management continuity or information continuity is the same thing. And I think it's the relationship that matters. Rather,
Right.
you can have information about somebody, but that's not what we're talking about in continuity of care.
Yes, exactly. And the fact that in continuity in primary care, it's the relational piece that pulls everything else together, that pulls in the management and the information. And yeah, it's much bigger than just the pieces of it.
And as you
Yeah.
say, longitudinal continuity is a means to an end. It's a mechanism. It's not the end itself, which is the relationship, but it's hard to measure the relationship, whereas it's much easier to measure whether they saw the same doctor.
Exactly. And but still the evidence is so compelling for that
Hmm.
concentrating care in one trusted provider
Yep.
that it baffles me that we're having to keep reminding policymakers about the evidence. Just recently with my friend Mylène Breton, who was one of your guests on this,
Mm-hmm.
we were able to actually come up with a quick document because the obsession was about access
Mm-hmm.
for the policy. But in fact, if you have access to n'importe quoi, as they say in French, to anything, it's not, you need to have access to the right things.
Yeah.
And that's so just being able to come back to that and remind the policymakers about the strength of the evidence and how much this matters, and that it's actually political. It matters to the population and it matters to the clinicians. It's not like a lot of other evidence. This really matters. Like it's important.
So, I mean, obviously, I agree with all of that, but it's interesting that this research has built up over 50 years, roughly. And as you say, lots of evidence of benefit. And yet, in the UK, continuity is almost disappeared. I don't know whether that's true in Canada as well, but why do you think, given all the evidence of benefit, it's disappearing?
Well, I'm just wondering, I I don't think that the profession defends it quite enough as
Mhm.
well. And I think that it's I don't know about this UK situation. I wish I did more, but certainly even in Canada, I think that sorry. I think that defending continuity calls clinicians to a higher standard. And it's not just a job then, it is actually uh, a relational healing. I think there is a bit of um, ambivalence even within the profession as to whether they want to defend this because it's not an easy call.
It's demanding of,
Yeah,
and it requires us. And although it's linked, it does require a certain amount of level of access to make it possible to provide continuity.
exactly. And actually, one of my um, one interest that came when I was looking at continuity and how it was practiced in Quebec, there were practices that were organized around access and practices that were organized around continuity, and they seem to kind of not be able to do both. Doing both seems to be really, really hard. And
Absolutely.
politically, I think there is more energy going towards access than there is towards what people get once they get their access.
And I guess that's because people complain if they can't get to see a doctor and they need to be able to see a doctor. But they
Yeah.
also want continuity, don't they? People do
Yeah.
want both, many people.
Yeah.
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 And I know you're particularly interested in access to care for vulnerable people. Do you want to say anything about that?
I think it's because as I was looking at the state of, primary care, there were groups that kept on recurring that regardless of other factors, they were just getting less access, less continuity, more hospitalizations and so on. So then it began to really it began to bother me. And I just thought that we needed to really attend to that. And this was partly too because at the same time there was this movement towards kind of self-management that the patient needs to take responsibility, and I totally agree with that. But there is actually a segment of the population that simply needs support. They need strong advocacy, they need good information. The online world doesn't serve them well. So I think that I just wanted to raise awareness of that because I could just see that it was about 15% of the population that just consistently feels like they're falling far behind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you've had a lot of success in research, but you've also been very involved in medical politics and professional development, which led to becoming president of NAPCRG in 2009, I think. What was your experience of being president of NAPCRG? What did you learn from it?
Well, I think that if I can just go back a little bit further about my
Mm-hmm.
relationship with NAPCRG, because I was introduced to NAPCRG when I was a doctoral student, and it's interesting because I kind of discovered my tribe there.
Mm-hmm.
And immediately I just got involved. I mean, it was awesome to go there and meet like the who's who of primary care research was unbelievable. And the attitude and the ethos of NAPCRG is is welcoming, it's bringing people in. So it was my tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So for the longest time I was involved on the program committee. I was like the number one fan. So I think that that's how I kind of came into leadership. That was a total surprise. But being at the leadership level was really amazing because I thought I knew a little bit about family medicine, but it was only at that level where I realized, wow, it's organized so differently everywhere in the world. Like to get this kind of global sense of how complex it is to organize, it was really something.
Mm-hmm.
But can I just go back to NAPCRG? I realize, I'm reflecting on my career a lot these days, and I realized that NAPCRG, there was a lot of alternate communities that kind of fed me in ways that academia did not, because academia can be pretty cutthroat sometimes. And NAPCRG was a place where it was safe to ask questions, it was safe not to know, and above all, it felt like a gift economy where people were just exchanging information and helping one another. And I think that that made a huge difference in the way that I wanted to live out my career and where I wanted to contribute. Yeah.
Mm. That's really interesting. Uh, I think I've observed several times that it's interesting that in primary care academia, most of the leaders are doctors rather than not doctors, and probably most of them are male. And yet, most of the people who work in academic departments of primary care doing research are not doctors and are female. Um, and I just wonder, yeah, what your experience has been of not being a doctor and being female, going into that position of leadership. Was that particularly difficult? And have you got any advice for younger female academics starting out now?
First of all, I think that things have changed for
Mhm.
younger, say female academics who are coming into it. I think that things are better now. But yes, it was an issue. And in fact, in my first university appointment that I had, I was told explicitly that I would never be able to assume any position of leadership within the Department of Family Medicine because I was not a doctor.
Mm.
And everywhere I would go, I was always the non in the room, like I'm the non-physician, the non,
Hmm.
like I just felt
Hmm.
like it was very strange to be characterized principally as a non
No.
something.
Hmm.
And that has changed now. And I think that I just don't feel it as patent anymore.
Hmm.
But it was kind of difficult at the beginning. And I had to overcome that script in my own mind. And again, this is where I go to being recognized by others who bring you forward for the skill set I did have, regardless of the fact that I did not conform to the kind of like
Hmm.
the container was different, but I think that I
Sure.
had certain skill sets. And ultimately, again, it's the mentor and the fact that that really matters at the end of the day.
So if you were writing your reference, what are the skill sets that you think you've particularly got?
Wow. Well, well, just for instance, having several languages is really
Hmm.
helpful. And again, this is something that seemed normal, but not particularly like an asset. So
Hmm.
I mean, all three, English, Spanish, and French. But to be able to work in those languages was really helpful. And I would say, looking back, I'm a bit of an enthusiast. So when I say yes easily, and then I jump in with my whole heart. And when I'm there, I'm just a doer. I'll just do anything. And I think that that's probably what set me apart as a student and so on. I didn't realize it at the time. I thought that was just the way everybody was. But now, looking back and looking at my own students, I realized, oh, yeah, that's pretty rare where somebody just jumps in and, okay, I'll do that. And,
Yeah.
you know, and I think I was too naive to be as terrified as I should have been of certain things.
Yeah.
And that took me a long way, just to
Yeah.
kind of like just start doing it before I actually thought, okay, what does this involve and what does this mean? And
Yeah.
I felt overcommitted a lot of the time, over my head. Um, you know, yeah. But I think that that was also one of the personality traits that kind of got me ahead.
Absolutely. So you've achieved a huge amount professionally, and I know that that must mean you work very hard. But what do you just do to switch off?
Wow. Again, just going back, I realized that this is the alternate communities and that how important, like looking back, having other places that did not value me by the same things as academia were super critical. So first and foremost was my family that, you come home and you're the one who's making supper and doing laundry. That's it, right? And being valued on that level. My church community was really, really critical to me because it was a very level, flattening playing field where I don't know, it's just like valued on different things. And then NAPCRG, as I said, was also this alternate place. But I'm married to an artist,
Hmm.
so I don't come home and talk shop.
Hmm.
And he has also introduced me to a world of creativity
Yeah.
and craft. I'm not anywhere near artistic like that, but we just some of the playing that we do together is about doing crafts and making things, and all of which to me is of absolutely no consequence because I can just make a mess of things, but it's still great fun. So I would say that probably the kind of I'm reluctant to call it a creative component, but I think that within my academic world that would be characterized as a creative component, not in the artistic world, but
But it
it's a
helps to
huge
have
part.
something outside medicine and somebody who's outside medicine and keeps you grounded and gives you a wider perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hoping when we produce a website from this interview that we can get a picture of Peter's on it somewhere to illustrate this bit of the interview. That's brilliant. Thank you. Well, Jeannie, you were telling me that you're coming up to retirement soon and you've been reflecting on life. So
Yeah.
anything else you want to say about that?
You know, I just feel so grateful, Chris, for looking back as I'm going through all my archives, deciding what needs to go for destruction and so on. I I have such a feeling of gratefulness for the people I've worked with. I also want to say the research assistants that often don't get the kind of credit and, value. I'm just in awe of the work that they do. So I'm just coming at it with such a sense of gratitude, and also a sense of gratitude that I have this feeling that I was carried, that I I did not plan. I was, invited into opportunities. I just kind of followed my nose a little bit. And I can
Mhm.
see I can see in retrospect what the commonality and the coherence is. But at the time, there was so little planning, and I was so freaked out most of the time, and scared and running. And am I ever going to make it? And I just wish I had calmed down a teeny bit more. but but
That's
yeah,
interesting, isn't
it's
it? So
been.
it's so easy to spend all your time thinking, I've got to have a big career strategy plan. But many people don't do that. They just do the thing that excites them. And then if they get bored with it, they do something different.
That's right.
Yeah.
And what if I just want, maybe if I can just say one last thing in terms of academic communities like NAPCRG, I was able to go to the Society for Academic Primary Care, the SAPC, in the
Uh-huh.
UK meetings a few times. And that is an awesome group. And I was also surprised by how different the tone was and the nature of the research that's done in the UK versus what is done in sort of largely North America. And it was really interesting. And I think that a lot of the really um, kind of foundational work comes out of the UK, looking at uh, things like what creates relationship and so on. Whereas we're much more obsessed with the health system, I think, in North America, and with the kind of biomedical clinical part of it.
Mhm.
And so I would certainly want to encourage anybody who's involved in SAPC that you're part of an incredible society there, and to just keep going. And what a privilege it's been to know people
Mhm.
like you, like
Mhm.
George Freeman, Martin Rowland, and John Campbell. These are people who I just have looked up to so much. And then I meet them at meetings, and you're actually real people. What a privilege that is to have.
Well, that's a testament to the importance of community in doing research, and not it's not just a lonely furrow, is it? Jeannie,
Yeah, yeah.
it's been a real pleasure as always to talk to you. Thank you so much for giving up your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.